She found a frozen Comanche baby in the snow, ... And someone was watching from the trees. The wind that morning didn't howl, it screamed. Snow swept through the pine trees like ghosts let loose, and the sky above, whispering hollow, was the color of gunmetal. Martha Caldwell pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, each step crunching through the deepening snow as she followed the faint trail of blood and tiny footprints. She should have stayed inside. The storm had warned everyone to shelter, but something had pulled her out, a sound barely audible beneath the storm's roar. A cry, a baby's cry. Martha had lived alone since the fire took her husband and son 3 winters ago. Her cabin was tucked deep into the hills, far enough from town to be forgotten. And maybe that was why she heard it, the kind of sound only a soul aching for meaning could hear. She spotted it near the edge of the frozen creek, a bundle half buried in snow, wrapped in tattered deerskin, and shaking so violently it barely made noise. Her breath caught as she dropped to her knees. It was a baby. His skin was dark. It's a kind of copper-toned brown she'd seen only once before, when a Comanche hunting party rode past her land and didn't stop. The child couldn't have been more than a few months old. Martha hesitated only a moment. This was a Comanche child. If the tribe was nearby, they might kill her for touching him, or worse, believe she stole him. But if she left him here, the snow would do what her fears wouldn't. She scooped him up, pressed him to her chest, and whispered, "You're safe now." The boy didn't cry. He just shivered against her like a thing made of ice and bones. Martha rose to her feet and turned back toward the cabin, boots dragging through the white wasteland, heart racing with something she hadn't felt in years, purpose behind her. A distant shadow shifted between the trees. That night, as the blizzard raged against her cabin walls, Martha warmed milk over the fire and wrapped the child in her late son's quilt. She didn't sleep. She sat and watched, hand on his chest to make sure he was still breathing. She didn't know who he was, didn't know where he came from, or who might come looking. All she knew was that the baby in her arms had survived something no child should. And somehow, so had she. Outside, the wind wailed like a warning, but inside, for the first time in years, there was warmth. By morning, the wind had calmed, but the world outside was buried in silence and white. Martha stepped out onto the porch, the baby wrapped snug in a quilt across her chest. The storm had passed, but what it left behind was pure wilderness. No tracks. No signs of anyone searching for the child. She stood there for a long while, scanning the tree line, her heart torn in 2 directions. If someone came for the child, what would she say? That she saved him? That she meant no harm? Or would they take that as theft? But no one came. Not that day. Not the next. Not for weeks. The boy, whom she began calling Little Ash after the gray flecks in his eyes, began to grow stronger. At night, he whimpered in his sleep, clutching at her finger. During the day, he refused to be out of her sight. The fear in him wasn't just cold or hunger, it was deeper, like he remembered something terrible. Martha didn't ask why. Things in this world didn't need names. She gave him goat's milk with honey, wrapped his feet in wool. When he cried, she hummed the same lullaby she once sang to her own son, the one buried just 50 feet from the cabin. Beneath the pine where winter birds gathered, her grief didn't vanish. It simply shifted. She stopped counting days by the sun and started measuring time by the boy's heartbeat. His first giggle came on the 12th day when she sneezed too loudly near the fire and nearly dropped a kettle. The sound startled her, then cracked something inside her open like thawed earth. She laughed too, but Martha wasn't naive. She knew the world outside her cabin was waiting, that one day someone would come. Maybe a Comanche scout, maybe a patrol from Fort Belmont, who'd shoot first and ask questions later. Either way, the clock was ticking, so she prepared. She kept a rifle by the door. She taught Little Ash to crawl fast. When she knocked on the floor twice, she even packed a small satchel with the boy's things, just in case she had to run with him into the woods. But no one came. Not until one night. Nearly 2 months later, when a knock echoed through her cabin door, it wasn't loud. Just 2 soft taps. Martha froze, spoon midair. The fire crackled, and Little Ash stirred in his sleep. She stood slowly, heart thudding louder than any storm. No. One knocked on her door. Not out here. She reached for the rifle, moved slowly toward the door. Who's there? She called. No answer, just wind. And the creak of a floorboard outside. She tightened her grip. Then the voice came quiet, gruff, spoken in broken English. You have... my blood. Asterisk if this story has your heart. Already? Don't forget to subscribe. Each chapter reveals a truth deeper than the last, and trust me, you won't forget how this ends. Asterisk Martha didn't breathe. The voice outside wasn't angry, but it held the kind of weight that made her bones ache. You have my blood, it had said, for words that landed like thunder in her chest. She cocked the rifle slowly. Barrel pointed at the door and whispered, "Step back." Silence. Then the voice again, this time softer. I know harm. I look only. She hesitated, then shifted toward the side window, careful not to make noise. Snow drifted against the sill, and in the pale moonlight, she saw him, a man standing. Still as stone, he wasn't armed. His braids were long, tied with leather, and his shoulders broad like a buffalo's. He wore a deerskin cloak dusted with snow and carried nothing but a small satchel. His eyes were locked on the door, and then he did something that nearly broke her. He dropped to his knees in the snow. Martha slowly opened the door, rifle still in hand. The cold slammed into her face like a slap, but she stood firm. What do you want? She asked. The man kept his head bowed. I followed trail, found blood and snow, child gone. Her heart thudded. She stared at him for a long beat before saying he was dying. I know. He nodded. You take him. I saved him, she said. That baby would have died if I hadn't. He looked up at her then, and his eyes, they weren't full of rage. They were full of something else entirely, grief. I had no time, he said. Soldiers came. We run, wife. She'll not make it. Carry child. Try find safe place. Martha felt the rifle in her hands begin to tremble. He's inside, she said, voice low, sleeping, alive. The man closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling like he'd held that breath for weeks. She didn't invite him in. Not yet. But she didn't shut the door either. He stayed kneeling in the snow, the silence stretching long between them, filled only by the distant crackle of firewood and the baby's soft breathing from inside. Finally, she asked, What's his name? The man blinked slowly. Tayoma means born in storm. She nodded. I've been calling him Little Ash. He almost smiled. Then she did something she hadn't planned. She stepped aside. You can come in. Leave your satchel outside. He obeyed without a word, stepping in slowly, like a man entering holy ground. His eyes found the baby immediately nestled by the hearth, bundled in Martha's late sons. Quilt the man's lip trembled. He moved toward him, but stopped short. May I? Martha gave a slow nod. He knelt beside the baby and touched one tiny hand with his fingertip. Tayoma stirred but didn't wake. The man whispered something in Comanche. A prayer, maybe, a goodbye, or a thank you. She couldn't tell then, to Martha's surprise. He stood and turned to leave. You're not taking him? She asked. He looked at her with eyes filled with weight no man should carry alone. He is safe here, he said. World outside. Not for him now. You gave him breath. You raise him. In time come he will choose. And just like that, he stepped out into the snow again. Martha watched until he disappeared into the dark, swallowed by trees and drifting white. Inside, Little Ash shifted, as if sensing something, then settled again. She sat beside him, tears. She didn't expect sliding down her cheek. For once, she didn't feel alone. She felt chosen. Years passed quietly in the fold of the valley, where snow melted into wildflowers, and spring pushed through sorrow like green breaking ice. Little Ash, or Tayoma, as she sometimes whispered when no one was around, grew not in inches first, but in understanding. He was quiet, observant, a boy with eyes too old for his age. He watched the fire like it held secrets. He listened to the wind like it spoke in code. And Martha, she loved him. not as a replacement for her own son, but as something new, something earned. She taught him to read using her husband's worn Bible and a stack of old dime novels. She showed him how to churn butter, mend a fence, and split logs in clean, even strokes. He watched her face more than her hands, as if her expression held deeper instructions. He didn't ask about his people, and she didn't push. But every now and then, she'd see him gazing at the horizon, as if expecting someone to ride over it, someone who looked like him. It's not like her. By the time he turned 6, Tayoma could shoot better than most boys twice his age. Martha had given him a small single shot rifle and taught him not just how to aim, but when not to. The hardest part of being strong, she said, is choosing when to be gentle. He nodded. Always did. That winter a trapper passed through, his first stranger in months. His horse was injured and he needed shelter. Martha hesitated but offered stew and warmth. The man stared hard at Tayoma. "That your boy?" he asked. Martha's jaw tightened. "He is." "Don't look like you," the trapper said. Tayoma stayed silent, his back straight, his eyes on the man like a hawk. Martha didn't answer, just kept stirring the pot. Later, after the man had left with his mended horse and unspoken suspicion, Tayoma sat near the fire and asked in a voice barely above a whisper, "Am I yours?" The question gutted her. She set the ladle down and turned to him. Kneeling, "You may not be from my body," she said, "but you are from my heart, and that's the part that chooses." His eyes glistened. Then he leaned forward and rapped. His arms around her neck. It was the first time he called her something new. "Ma." The next day she found a small arrowhead placed on her pillow. Cleaned, polished. She never asked where he found it, but she kept it wrapped in cloth. Beside her son's old wooden toy horse in the chest near the bed, time didn't freeze. It just flowed like the stream near their cabin, sometimes soft, sometimes wild, but always forward. And then came the day she saw smoke on the ridgeline. Not firewood smoke, not from a cook fire. It was a signal. High. Meant to be seen, Martha. Stared at it for a long time before she turned to Tayoma. Now, nearly 11, his jaw strong, shoulders beginning to broaden inside. "Now," she said. He obeyed, but his eyes stayed locked on the smoke, as if part of him already knew what it meant. The past was calling, and it had found them. The smoke stayed in the sky all afternoon, not thick, not rising from trees or caught brush. It was controlled, deliberate, a signal made by someone who knew what message it would send, and it wasn't made for just anyone. It was made for Tayoma. Martha knew it. That evening, as the boy helped her stack kindling near the woodshed, she asked gently, "Do you know what that smoke means?" He paused, hands still wrapped around the logs, his gaze distant. "It's from my people," he said quietly. "It says, ... we see you." Martha's breath caught. "How long have you known?" He looked at her, older than his years, eyes deep as the old river. "Always," he replied. "In dreams, in memories, in ... things I feel." That night she didn't sleep. She sat at the table, lantern burning low, eyes fixed on the door, as if expecting someone to walk through it. Tayoma lay wrapped in the same quilt he'd been found in, still small enough to look like a child, but old enough now to carry the weight of 2 worlds. When the knock came, it wasn't soft like before. It was firm. 3 taps, no hesitation. Martha stood slowly, fingers brushing over the rifle, but she didn't reach for it. Something in her had shifted too. She opened the door. Outside stood a woman. She was tall, draped in fur and leather, face lined not with age, but with memory. Her eyes were sharp, her expression unreadable, part mother, part warrior. And behind her, 3 others, 2 men and a girl, all silent. They didn't reach for weapons. They didn't smile. The woman spoke first. "I am Nani. I am." "Blood?" Martha swallowed. "You're his kin?" Nani nodded. "His aunt, sister to the one who birthed him." Pause. "Then we come for peace. And to see." Tayoma stepped into the doorway. His breath caught in his throat when he saw them. Something flickered across his face, not recognition, but yearning. Nani looked at him long and slow, like she was mapping the soul behind his eyes. "He lives," she whispered. "He lives well." Martha's hands shook, hidden in her dress folds. "You came for him?" Nani looked at her, and for the first time, softened. "We came to know if he still remembers." Tayoma stepped forward. "I remember snow," he said.
I remember running.
Cold. A fire. A woman singing. He looked at Martha. "I remember warmth, and a voice that gave me a name." Nani turned to Martha again. "You raised him well? Strong, whole, that is not forgotten." Psst. Silence lingered like smoke. Then she reached into her satchel and pulled out something wrapped in elk hide. A carved pendant, worn smooth, shaped like a hawk. Nani handed it to Tayoma. "This belonged to your mother. She would want you to have it now." He took it with shaking fingers. For a moment, no one moved. Then, without a word, the group turned and walked back into the forest, not asking him to come, not trying to take, just leaving a door open. That night, Tayoma stood by the window, holding the hawk pendant, its smooth wood brushing against his chest. Martha sat by the fire, stitching quietly. "Ma," he said. She looked up. "I want to know them, but I don't want to leave you." She smiled gently, the kind that comes after storms and long winters. "You don't have to choose yet," she said. "But when you do, choose with your heart. That's the only map that never lies." The days that followed were filled with a silence deeper than snow. Tayoma wore the hawk pendant under his shirt, fingers often brushing it when he thought she wasn't looking. But Martha noticed. She noticed everything. The way he stared longer, out the window. It's the way he hesitated before calling her Ma, like the words still fit. But not perfectly anymore, and she didn't blame him. She'd always known this day would come. The day he'd start wondering who he really was. And whether she was just a chapter, or the whole book. One morning, while chopping wood, he paused mid-swing. "Ma," said, wiping sweat from his brow, "do you think they'll come again?" Martha looked up from the garden. "Think they will, when they believe you're ready?" He nodded slowly. "And what if I'm never ready?" She walked to him and set a hand on his shoulder. "Then they'll wait. And if they don't, then they never truly deserved you." His jaw clenched. "But what if I belong to both?" "You do," she said. "You can be more than one thing. Just never let anyone tell you who that has to be." That night, Tayoma couldn't sleep. Stepped outside, the cool wind wrapping around him like a whisper. The moon lit the woods in silver, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called low and long. He walked toward the pine tree where Martha's real son lay buried, kneeling beside it. Tayoma whispered, "I know you were hers first. I'm not trying to take your place, but maybe." We both saved her in different ways. A breeze stirred the branches overhead, like someone agreeing in silence. At dawn, everything changed. A gunshot cracked through the valley like lightning through clear skies. Martha jerked awake, hand flying to the rifle. Right? The window. A plume of smoke was rising, not from the ridge, but from the east. Farther, lower, and moving another shot. This time, closer, then voices harsh. Laughing, English, not Comanche. Martha's stomach dropped. "Bandits," she whispered. "Trappers, maybe, or deserters." Tayoma's fists clenched. "What do we do?" "If they see you, they won't care who raised you. They'll only see what they hate." He didn't ask why. He didn't argue. He just nodded. They moved fast. Martha pulled up floorboards she hadn't touched in years, revealing a hidden crawl space beneath the cabin. She pushed Tayoma inside, handed him a canteen, and pressed her fingers to his lips. "If anything happens, you wait till they're gone, no matter what you hear." His eyes burned. "I'm not leaving you. You will if I tell you to. My boy and I won't lose you too." He slipped into the darkness. Martha closed the boards, slid the rug back over, stood just as the cabin door burst open with a booted kick. 3 men strode in, guns drawn, dirty, wild, eyed reeking of Whiskey and long travel. Well, one sneered. Looks like we found a nest. Martha stood tall, rifle in hand. I don't want trouble, she said. There's nothing here for you. The leader stepped closer. That's so you always talk to guests with a loaded rifle? I don't. Have guests, he grinned, a broken, crooked thing. We're different then. We invite ourselves. Martha didn't flinch. She'd faced storms, wolves, grief that could drown a soul. She wasn't about to be broken by 3 cowards with guns. But what she didn't see was that one of them had noticed the floorboards shift, and he was already stepping toward them. The third man's boot creaked as he stepped toward the corner of the cabin where a small breeze lifted the edge of the old wool rug. His eyes narrowed. He crouched, brushing the fabric aside. Floorboards looked just a little too clean. A little too carefully set, and they moved when he pressed them. Martha saw it from across the room, saw the moment his hand curled around the wood, and without hesitation, she raised her rifle. Step back, she said. The man froze. Well, what you hiding, ma'am? I said, back away from there. The leader laughed behind her. You threatening us, widow? I'm protecting what's mine, but the third man didn't stop. His hand tugged at the board end. Before he could lift it fully, a sound cracked through the stillness. Not a gunshot, not a scream. A voice, fierce, young. Leave her alone. The floor burst open from beneath, and Tayoma surged upward, pushing the board aside with one arm and swinging with the other. A wooden handle from an old shovel striking the man's jaw clean and hard. The man collapsed like a dropped sack of grain. Martha's breath caught. No Tayoma. The boy stood tall now, rifle in his hands. He must have grabbed it from the crawl space, the old single shot she'd given him at age 6. His chest rose and fell like he was trying to contain. Fire. The second man raised his revolver. Drop it, boy. Tayoma didn't blink. He said drop it. But the leader raised a hand. Wait. He stepped forward, studying the boy. That ain't your kin, he said slowly. He don't got your skin, your eyes. She's my mother, Tayoma growled. The leader raised a brow. That right? What? Martha stepped between them, rifle. Still aimed? That boy saved your man's life with a warning shot instead of a bullet. That's more honor than the 3 of you have combined. The room crackled with tension. The third man groaned on the floor, blood dripping from his lip. Kid damn near broke my jaw. You were about to hurt someone who raised him like her own flesh, the leader muttered. Maybe you deserved it. Long pause followed. The fire popped behind them. Outside, a crow cawed in the distance. Then the leader chuckled, low and bitter. Let's go. What? The second man barked. You serious? We ain't gonna shoot a boy protecting his ma. Not today. He turned, walking toward the door. You got spine, kid, he added, without looking back. Keep it. This world will try to tear it out of you. The others followed, dragging the groaning man with them. And just like that, cabin was quiet again. Martha dropped her rifle. Tayoma stood still, breathing hard, arms shaking now that the fire was gone from his veins. She crossed the room and pulled him into her arms. You disobeyed me, she whispered. I know, he said, but I couldn't let them hurt you. She pulled back, brushing his hair from his face. I wasn't angry, she said, her voice catching. I was terrified of losing you. You won't, he said firmly. Not ever. That night. They sat together by the fire. The cabin smelled of wood smoke, and tension faded. Tayoma carved a piece of pine with his knife, shaping it slowly, quietly. Martha mended the same old quilt, the one that had once wrapped him as a baby in a blizzard. He paused, holding up the shape. It was a tiny wooden hawk. She watched me, he said, eyes soft, in the trees. The Comanche woman, Nani. You sure? He nodded. Didn't speak, just watched. And I felt something, like she wanted to see who I was, not just what I'd become. Martha stared into the fire. She'd come again, she said. Tayoma looked at the hawk, then at his mother. I hope she does. 2 weeks passed since the bandits left, but their shadow remained. Tayoma spent more time. Alone now, walking deeper into the forest, carving wood into shapes that meant something only to him. Martha watched from the window, heart both full and breaking. She knew what was happening. He was listening to the pull, to the part of him she could never reach, but she didn't stop him. Love, if it was real, never locked the door. One morning, as dew still kissed the grass, Tayoma returned from the woods with a strange look in his eyes. Martha looked up from the porch steps. "Everything all right?" He nodded, then paused. "I saw someone," he said. "Not Nani. Someone else who. A man. On the ridge, standing still. Just watching me." Her chest tightened. "Did he speak?" Tayoma nodded. "You are the hawk's son," he said, and then he was gone. Martha stood slowly. "Did he wear anything? Like your pendant?" He had markings on his face, red paint, 2 stripes. She froze. That wasn't just a visitor. That was a Comanche scout, and red stripes meant warrior blood. That night, Tayoma couldn't sleep. He sat outside under the stars, the wooden hawk hanging around his neck, his eyes scanning the tree line, like it held answers. The wind carried voices that didn't speak in words. Just feelings. Martha stepped beside him, wrapping a shawl around his shoulders. "Tell me what's weighing on you." He looked at her, tired in a way no child should be. "I feel like being asked to choose, them or you." She sat beside him. "Tayoma, listen to me. You are not a torn thing. You are whole. You are both. What they gave you in blood, I gave you in life. You don't have to pick between them. Just ... be true to who you are." "But what if I don't know who that is?" "Then we'll find out together." Suddenly a voice came from the dark. "You already know." They both jerked around. Standing just beyond the firelight was the warrior, the one from the ridge. Broad-shouldered, face painted, eyes sharp like eagle claws. He held no weapon, but his presence was thunder. Martha stood fast, hand instinctively twitching toward the rifle. But Tayoma stepped forward. "Who are you?" The warrior looked at Martha, then back at the boy. "I am Atuka, son of Fire Cloud, brother of the one who died saving you." Tayoma's breath caught. "My uncle." Ituka nodded. "You were of her blood. You were born in fire and storm. Your people wait. They do not come to steal you. They come to remind you who you were." Martha swallowed hard. "And if I say he's already who he's meant to be?" Atuka's voice softened, almost respectful. "Then I say, hawk cannot live forever in a cage, even if the cage is warm." Tayoma stepped closer. "What do you want me to do?" Atuka placed a leather-wrapped bundle at his feet. Inside, feathers, a flint knife, a small leather chest. Not to leave her, not to forget, only to come, for 3 days. Learn what was yours, then choose. He looked at Martha. "He will be safe. I give my word." And with that, the warrior turned, disappearing into the trees without sound, as if he were never really there. Tayoma bent down and touched the bundle. Martha watched, heart in her throat. 3 days, she whispered. He looked up. "Can I?" Away. She reached out, touched his cheek. "You came to me from a storm. Maybe it's time you step into one again, to find out what you're made of." He didn't smile, but he nodded. Tayoma left before sunrise. He didn't say much, just hugged Martha tight, the kind of embrace that felt more like a promise than a goodbye. Her fingers lingered on the hawk pendant at his chest. "Come back, Hole," she whispered. "I will." And then he was gone, following Atuka into the woods, the dawn stretching its golden fingers across the valley as if blessing the journey. They walked for hours. No words, just silence and steps. Atuka moved like part of the land. His feet never crushed leaves, his breath never disturbed birds. Tayoma followed, watching him, mimicking the rhythm, learning without being taught by midday. They crested a ridge and saw it, the Comanche camp. Teepees stood in a perfect circle like a clock made. Of earth and bone, smoke drifted upward. Children ran barefoot in the grass. Women skinned deer, their eyes catching Tyoma, like wind catching fire, curious, unsure. Ituka gestured toward the center. "This is where you were born. This is where your mother sang. Your name." The first to greet him was Nani. She stepped forward, emotion flashing in her usually still eyes. She reached out, touching Tayoma's cheek, the same way Martha did, gently, as if grounding a spirit. "You have grown tall." The Hawkinu did not die. Tayoma didn't speak. She led him through the camp, showing him the fire circle. The buffalo hide stretched in the sun, the river where his mother once washed his swaddling cloths. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled when she gave him a folded cloth inside a tiny beaded moccasin. "Your foot once fit in this," she said. "You nearly died that winter. You never stopped mourning." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know anyone still remembered me." Nani looked up. Your name was not forgotten, only paused. That evening, the council gathered. Elders sat around the fire, and Ituka brought Tayoma forward. He was given a blanket to wear, red and brown, with symbols he didn't understand. Ituka stepped back, allowing the boy to stand alone. An elder leaned forward. "Do you know why you are here?" Tayoma nodded. "To remember." "To become," another said. "You are both wind and root. But until you face both paths, your soul will not settle." Then came the test, a journey through the woods at night, alone. No fire, no food, just instinct and the stars. They called. "Ipia Takana," the shadow walk. Ituka handed him a small blade and a pouch. "No spirits will guide you," he said. "Only the ones already inside." Tayoma didn't flinch. "I'm ready." The path wound through trees, darker than ink. Owls hooted above. Branches scraped like whispers against his shoulders. But Tayoma didn't stop. He listened to every breath, every footfall. Hours passed. Then a sound not from the trees, but inside him, a baby crying. He turned suddenly. The woods blurred, flickered, and in the darkness he saw an image not real. But real enough, eh? Woman running, snow falling, a child in her arms. Gunshots in the distance. His mother. He reached out, but the image faded. And just like that, he was alone again. But something had shifted. He didn't feel afraid anymore. By dawn, he returned to the camp, eyes hollow, clothes torn. The hawk pendant glowing warm on his chest. Ituka met him at the edge and nodded once. "You walked like a warrior." Nani stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "You are Comanche." Tayoma looked back at the trail behind him, then toward the mountains beyond. "No," he whispered. "I'm both." Tayoma woke to the soft murmur of voices around the fire. His eyes felt heavy, the weight of what he had seen and felt, pressing on him like stones. He sat up slowly, the warmth of the flames cutting through the cold of the early morning. Ituka sat across from him, sharpening a flint knife. His gaze was steady, unyielding. "Sleep well?" Ituka asked without looking up. Toyoma didn't respond. Right away. He was still lost in the night's vision. His mother's face, the gunshots, the snow, the sound of a baby crying in the distance. Everything felt so real, yet so distant, so untouchable. Does it always feel like that? Tayoma asked, his voice raw. Ituka's eyes finally met his. "The truth always feels distant. It's the cost of knowing," Tayoma exhaled. "But what am I supposed to do now?" "You go back," Ituka said simply, "to where your heart truly lies." The journey back to the valley felt different. Every step, every rustle of leaves beneath his boots seemed like a crossroads. Choice was looming, as inevitable as the sunrise, yet no easier to make. Comanche or Martha, both felt like home, but neither fully did. When the ridge came into view, he saw the cabin, his cabin. His heart clenched. It had been a lifetime since he'd seen Martha, the woman who had raised him, loved him, and taught him how to be a man. Yet now, there was something that held him back. something that made his feet feel like they were stuck in mud. He didn't want to hurt her, didn't want to make her feel like she wasn't enough. But wasn't it her that always told him that? Love didn't belong to one place? By the time he reached the porch, it was dusk. He stood for a long moment, taking in the familiar sight of the cabin, the overgrown wildflowers by the door, the low roof with patches of moss, the lanterns flickering. In the windows, it all seemed so unchanged, so untouched by the storm inside of him. Then, the door creaked open. Martha stood there, her eyes wide as she took in the sight of him. The silence stretched between them like an unspoken truth. "Tayoma," she whispered. Almost as if afraid she'd wake from a dream, he stepped forward slowly, as though unsure of his place. "I'm home," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Her eyes filled with tears. She took a tentative step toward him, then another, until she was standing before him, her hand shaking as she reached up to touch his face. "You've grown," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I've changed," he replied softly, his own voice faltering. Her hands lingered on his cheek, as if memorizing the feel of him, and then, just as quickly, her hands fell away, her expression shifting too. Something unreadable. "You've been gone too long," she said quietly, stepping back. "What happened out there?" Tayoma looked down, his gaze lost in the shadows of the porch. "I went to find who I am, and now I don't know if I can." "Ever come back from it?" Martha's eyes filled with understanding, but also a deep sadness. She didn't speak for a long time, and when she did, it was in a voice so quiet, it felt like the earth itself was holding its breath. "Sometimes, the hardest part of loving someone is letting them go." Tayoma's chest tightened. "Are you asking me to leave?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "No," she said, her voice steady, but her heart on display. "I'm asking you to stay, for the right reasons." They stood there, the fading light of the day casting long shadows behind them. The world around them was still, but inside, Tayoma was torn between two worlds, two calls that were both pulling at him. The winds of fate howled in his mind, leaving him no clear path forward. Martha's words echoed in his heart. "Stay for the right reasons." He looked up at her, searching her eyes for answers that didn't exist. "I don't know what that means," he said softly, "but I'm trying to understand." She nodded, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled a sad, quiet smile. "You will. One day you will." The next morning was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in when hearts speak in silence but mouths stay shut. Martha stirred the fire. Tayoma chopped wood. Neither spoke. The distance between them wasn't physical, it was a shadow that hovered in the space between glances, in the stillness between footsteps. It was love. Twisted by uncertainty, Martha watched him from the corner of her eye. His shoulders were broader now, his movements slower, more deliberate. He was no longer the boy who once chased butterflies with muddy boots. He moved like someone who had seen something ancient, something sacred, and couldn't unsee it. She wanted to ask, "What did they show you?" But instead she asked, "You still take sugar in your coffee?" He paused, then nodded. Yeah, it was the smallest thing. Thread, a lifeline. But it was something. They sat at the table, coffee steaming between them, silence thick as winter frost. Finally, Martha spoke. "You don't belong here anymore, do you?" Tayoma looked down. "That's not fair." "I didn't say you don't belong with me," she said gently. "I said you don't belong here." He swallowed hard. "I saw where I came from, Ma, and it didn't feel foreign. Felt like a part of me was waking up." She nodded, slowly, like she'd rehearsed this moment for years. "That part of you. It deserves air, Tayoma. It deserves to grow. But it feels like I'm betraying you." She whispered, her voice cracking for the first time. "Loving something new doesn't erase the love that saved you." Later that day, he went to the river, the same one where Martha had once washed his fevered body. Praying he'd live through that first terrible winter, he knelt, letting the cold water run over his hands. Then he reached into his satchel and pulled out the pouch Atuka had given him. Inside feathers, a strip of red cloth, a shard of flint, but tucked beneath all of it was a folded piece of buckskin, and inside it, name written in charcoal, Takakoa's son of two winds. It wasn't a command, it was a gift. He sat there for hours until the sun began to dip behind the pines when he returned to the cabin. Martha was on the porch, knitting something that looked like it hadn't needed to be knitted just to keep her hands moving. He held out the buckskin paper. She took it carefully, read it. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. "Is that what they call you?" He nodded. "It's what she called me." Martha closed her eyes, clutching the name like it was a second child. "I've been selfish," she said suddenly. "I held on too tight. You saved me," he said. "That's not selfish. I was afraid that if I let you remember, I'd lose you." He stepped closer, placing his hand over hers. "You didn't lose me. I just, found more of me." She looked at him, pain and pride swirling in her eyes. "I don't know how to be part of that world." "You don't have to be," he said softly. "Just don't shut me out when I go back to learn more." The porch light flickered in the soft breeze. She took a deep breath. "Then promise me one thing, anything. Don't forget who you were when you had nothing, and I was all you had." He nodded, eyes shining. "I could never forget that, Ma. You were the beginning of everything." The next morning, the birds were too quiet. Tayoma noticed it first, the way the wind held still, the way even the creek behind the cabin seemed to hush itself. A silence not of peace, but of warning. He stood on the porch, scanning the tree line, and then he saw it. A shimmer. A flicker of movement too low for deer, too silent for bear. He stepped off the porch slowly and walked toward the pines. Heart tightening. From the shadow a figure emerged. Ichika, his chest heaved with breath, red dust streaking his arms. His voice was low but urgent. "They're coming. White men. 5, maybe more. Drunk. Angry. They raided one of our small camps. Took food. One child missing." Tayoma's eyes widened. "They'll come through this valley." Ituka nodded. "They always go where no one watches." Tayoma rushed back to the cabin. Martha was inside, grinding corn. She looked up at the sound of his boots. "They're coming," he said. "Raiders." Didn't blink. Just set down the pestle. "How long?" "Few hours. Maybe less." She moved without panic, gathering the rifle, checking its load, placing extra rounds in her apron pocket. Tayoma watched her, heart surging with something fierce and warm. This woman, his mother, had never been weak. Never needed saving. But he still wouldn't let her stand alone. Ituka remained outside, quiet like a sentry. Tayoma joined him, eyes locked on the far ridge. "What do we do?" he asked. "We fight, but we don't start it, and the others. They'll come if they hear the hawk cry." Tayoma looked confused. Ituka pulled from his satchel a carved wooden whistle shaped like a hawk's beak. "Your mother? Your blood mother carved this before the winter took her. She said one day it might call the people back to her son." He handed it to Tayoma. "Blow it when you must, not before." Hours passed. The sun dipped lower. Shadows grew longer. Then came the horses. 5 men rode into the clearing, dust-covered, sneering guns slung low. Their laughter was loud, empty. They didn't knock, just dismounted and strolled toward the cabin like it was theirs. One of them shouted, "We hear a savage was seen around here. Thought we'd have a look ourselves." Tayoma stepped forward. "There's no one here but family." The man smirked. "Then you won't mind if we search a little?" Behind him, another man reached for his pistol. Martha stepped out, rifle already raised. "You shoot that gun," she said coldly, "and you'll never raise it again." The standoff was quick, tight, and breathless. The men hesitated, unsure, but Tayoma saw it, the flicker in the second man's hand. He was going to shoot, without thinking. Tayoma raised the hawk whistle and blew. The sound cut through the valley. Like a cry of vengeance, seconds passed, then whoops in the trees. Shadows moving, figures rising from the brush like ghosts, Comanche warriors. At least 10, painted, armed. The riders turned, startled. One cursed. One dropped his gun. Another tried to run, only to be circled by two fast-moving riders from behind the trees. Etuk stepped forward. His voice thundered. You come here for blood? You'll drown in your own. The men now surrounded dropped their weapons. Ituka nodded at Tayoma. This is your land too now. You defended it like a son, like a warrior. After the raiders were taken, the clearing returned to calm, to say. Ma stood beside Martha on the porch. She looked up at him, pride shining in her eyes. You didn't hesitate. I knew what had to be done. She nodded. Your father would have said the same. Tayoma turned sharply. My father. Martha hesitated, then walked inside. She returned moments later with a folded piece of leather. Inside was a sketch. A man with sharp eyes, dark braids, and a hawk tattoo on his collarbone. He came to me one night. Wounded, fleeing soldiers. I gave him shelter. I never saw him again. Tayoma's throat tightened. You think that was... She looked at him gently. I think the hawk's cry runs deeper than any blood. The night had never felt so full. After the raiders were driven out, and the warriors returned to the trees. The valley breathed a little easier, but Martha didn't. She sat alone at the hearth. The folded leather with the sketch of Tayoma's father in her lap, her hands trembling. Tayoma stood nearby, watching her as the firelight danced on her face. I think you always knew, he said gently. She looked up, her eyes shimmering. I didn't want to. I didn't want to believe he'd left both of us behind. Tayoma knelt in front of her. You didn't raise me in his shadow. You raised me in your light. A tear slipped down her cheek. But now you want to walk in his. He shook his head. No, I want to walk in mine. But I needed to know where it began. She handed him the leather. Said his name was Tohani, means hawk who rises. He was injured, bleeding. I patched him up and kept him hidden for 3 days. Then he was gone. Tayoma unfolded the leather again. The hawk tattoo, the same as on his pendant. He left this, she continued. Said it was protection. Said if anything happened to him, the boy it was meant for would find his way. Tayoma whispered, He knew about me? Martha nodded slowly. He knew the risk of staying. Soldiers were hunting him. He didn't say it, but I saw it in his eyes. He had to leave so you could live. Elma stood up and walked to the window. The moon hung low, pale and watching. Outside the wind rustled the tall grass. It sounded like a whisper of names long forgotten. Names like Tohani, like Tokakaz. He turned back to Martha. I've spent years feeling like two people in one. Skin now, I see. I'm the child of two storms. Yours and his. You're more than that, she said softly. You're what happens when mercy meets fire. He looked at her, voice low. What happens now? You live, she answered, as a man with two names and one heart. The next day they rode together just a few miles beyond the ridge, to a clearing near the stream. Martha had been there before. She showed him a stone under the tall cedar, smooth and unmarked. His body was never found, she said. But this is where I come, when I need to believe he watches. Tayoma stood silently, the pendant in his hand. Then, without a word, he tied it to a branch above the stone. It swung gently in the wind, catching sunlight and memory. At UKA arrived by evening. He stood at the edge of the clearing, arms folded, gaze respectful. You came back, said. I did, Tayoma replied, and I know now. I can stand in both worlds. Ituka stepped forward, holding out a folded cloth. Inside it, Tayoma's first warrior sash. You defended your land. Protected your blood. The council has named you. Tayoma opened the cloth and saw the name burned into leather. Takukoa's son of two winds. He smiled, not with pride, but with peace. Martha watched from a few steps away. She didn't cry. Not this time, because for the first time in years, she saw him whole. Not a lost boy, not a broken history, but a man. Her son. Days passed quietly after the raid, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet as before. It was softer now. Not silence wrapped in fear, but peace wrapped in truth. Martha moved slower, but her shoulders were lighter. The secrets that had weighed her down for years were finally spoken, and in their place, something beautiful had grown. Trust Tayo Ma no longer felt like he was running between two worlds. He had begun building a bridge between them, plank by plank, choice by choice. One morning, Atuka returned once more. He didn't come with warnings this time. He came with news. "There's a child," he said, stepping inside the cabin, found alone 2 valleys north. Her family was attacked on the trail west. She survived. Martha's breath caught. "How old?" "6, maybe 7. She won't speak." Tayoma straightened. "Where is she now?" Tuka looked at him. "We brought her to the old healer's hut. She hasn't eaten." In the eye. Something in Tayoma shifted. A flicker. A mirror. "I want to see her," he said. The healer's hut sat in a shaded grove by the river. When Tayoma stepped inside, the girl sat in a corner, curled up beneath a worn wool blanket. Her eyes were wide, not from fear, but from absence. He sat slowly across from her. Didn't speak, didn't reach. He simply took the hawk pendant from his neck, the same one his father left behind, and placed it on the ground between them. Her eyes drifted to it, then to him. Still, she said nothing, so he whispered, "I didn't speak for a long time either." The girl blinked, then whispered back, barely audible, "Where's my mother?" He didn't lie, didn't soften it. "I don't know," he said. "I know what it feels like when no one answers that question." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't run. Instead, she crawled forward, picked up the pendant, and held it to her chest. By the time Tayoma returned to the cabin, the sun was dipping low. Martha was on the porch. "Sewing a quilt," she spoke. He said. Martha looked up. "I think she needs what I had." She didn't ask questions. Didn't hesitate. "She can stay here," Martha said softly. "We always have room." Tayoma shook his head. "She needs both her names just like I did. I want to take her back with me. To the valley. To Itoka. She grows strong there. Learn her roots." Martha's face was still, but her eyes trembled. "You're leaving," she said. He nodded. "But I'm not leaving you. I'm carrying you with me." That night, they sat by the fire one last time. No words, just the warmth of memory and flame. Martha reached into the old box near her rocking chair and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She handed it to Tayoma. Inside, the first shoes he ever wore. Worn. Tiny. Hand-stitched. Double quotes. "I kept these," she said, "because they were the only proof I had that you were mine." He looked up, his voice choked. "And now?" She smiled through her tears. "Now, I don't need proof. I just need you two keep going." Dawn painted the sky in a soft red haze, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Tayoma saddled his horse with calm hands. Behind him, the girl clutched a small woven doll Martha had given her, its yarn hair frayed, but its smile still. Stitched in place, Martha stood on the porch, arms crossed tight across her chest. She didn't speak, and neither did Tayoma. Some goodbyes aren't meant for words. Instead, he walked up to her and handed her a folded paper. Inside, a drawing, crude but clear. It showed a cabin, or valley, and 2 figures beneath a cedar tree. On the back he'd written, "This isn't where it ends. It's where it begins again." Martha touched the paper to her heart. "I'll visit," she said. "You better," he smiled softly. "The girl keeps asking about the woman who sews magic into quilts." Martha's lips trembled, but she didn't cry. She had cried enough. Now it was time to let him be the man she raised him to become. The ride through the valley was silent. At first, the girl leaned against Tehama's back, her small hands gripping his coat. At one point, she whispered, "Will I see her again?" Didn't hesitate. "You'll feel her again. That's stronger." As the trees opened up into wide prairie, Atuka stood waiting. He raised his hand in quiet welcome, but his eyes lingered. "On the child, she is like you," Ituka said. "No," Tayoma replied. She's better. Ituka nodded. Then raise her like the woman who raised you. Seasons passed. The girl, now called Wanya, learned to track the stars, braid her own hair, speak in both tongues. But it wasn't just knowledge she gained. It was healing. Every time she laughed, it echoed through the valley like a song Martha once hummed at twilight. Every time she sat by the fire with Tayoma, resting her head on his shoulder, it felt like the world had come full circle. Tayoma would visit Martha each winter, bringing dried berries and letters Wania had written in crooked handwriting. Each time, Martha's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of quiet pride. She hadn't just saved one life in that blizzard years ago. She had lit a fire that would burn long after she was gone. Years later, long after Tayoma had become a respected chief among his people, not because of war, but because of wisdom, he would sit on the same porch Martha once stood on. Wanye, now nearly grown, would ask, "Do you think she knew how much she changed?" And Tayoma would answer, voice soft as dusk, "She didn't just change me. She taught the wind how to carry love." And now, to you watching this story, I've heard, heart beat a little faster. If your throat tightened somewhere between her goodbye and his promise. If you saw even a flicker of your own story in theirs, then don't let this story fade into silence. Click that like, tap subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to believe in second chances, in chosen family, in love that outlives blood, because out here in the wild west of hearts, sometimes the fiercest warriors are the ones who never carried a gun.